Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure for me to take a call in this third reading of the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and the Riccarton Racecourse Bill, and as was made obvious during the early stages of the debate, Labor supports this bill. But I have to say it's a bit rich, actually. Even for the minister, even for that minister, it's a bit rich to have him claim credit for the development of 600 houses in Canterbury, which were entirely instigated by the board of the Riccarton Racecourse. I don't think that minister is a member of the board. That minister was asked to shepherd this legislation, or part of this legislation, through the House, and good on him for doing that, and good on him for getting the support of so many members of this House. But for him to claim credit for the development as if it was a state housing or social housing proposal just beggars belief. But they've got to be desperate for any glimpse of light, after any silver lining on their dark cloud few weeks that they've had. Usually after a budget, the government sort of bounces around the place. Well, the only place this government has been bouncing since the budget is down. They've been showing their true colours, increasingly arrogant and out of touch with the wishes of everyday New Zealanders. Right. They've been totally ignoring the big issues. The big issues that people are concerned about don't seem to be anywhere near this government's agenda. They have totally ignored the housing crisis. Arguing about whether it's a crisis or not doesn't help a single person move into a warm, dry, affordable home. They totally ignore the jobs issue. They totally ignore the wages issue. And now they're ignoring the increasing costs that families in New Zealand have to face when sending their children to their local school. Education costs, jobs, housing, health, underfunding are all issues that are totally ignored by this government. Mr. Speaker, under these two bills, 600 houses will be built on what is currently Riccarton Racecourse land. 30% of those houses are going to be built for less than $450,000, or sold for less than $450,000. That figure has been described as affordable, and I certainly hope it is, because we know that unlike when we were young and grew up and knew that if we worked hard and saved hard that we'd be able to put a deposit on a home and call it our own, many members in this House have had the opportunity to do that, to buy a home. But sadly, for many New Zealanders now, even $450,000 in Christchurch is well out of their range of affordability. I hope that a lot of people who currently can't afford to buy a home are able to buy one of those affordable homes. But I am sure that despite that, we are still seeing the Kiwi dream of owning your own home being totally off the agenda for many New Zealand families, and particularly for young people. So 40 hectares of the current entire Riccarton Racecourse area is going to be turned over for housing. As I said earlier, this is a move that was entirely instigated by the Board of Trustees of Riccarton Racecourse, and I want to pay tribute not just to the current trustees, but to former trustees as well. They've had a huge responsibility since the instigation of the Christchurch Racecourse Reserve Act of 1878 to provide this public racecourse for the benefit not just of Cantabrians but of all New Zealanders, and more recently from the Reserves Act of 1977. So those two pieces of legislation are what is being changed by these two bills, the Reserves Act and the Christchurch Racecourse Reserve Act of 1878. So we had a government bill and a local bill initially. I queried during the committee stages about whether it was the first time that we had a government bill and a local bill being heard in tandem, and I want to return to the answer to that question. I'd hoped the Minister had been able to answer it during the committee stages. I hoped even more that he would have been able to address it in his third reading speech, but he didn't. Mr. Speaker, I guess for many in the National Party and particularly the ministers of the national government. They'll be hoping that the passing of these bills, and I certainly support their passing, will quieten down the noise around housing issues. But actually what it will do in reality is put an even stronger spotlight on who is doing what to address the housing crisis in New Zealand. We know one of the organisations that really put their hand up and said, we can see our people in trouble with nowhere decent to sleep at night, including children sleeping in cars and garages, for heaven's sake, in New Zealand in 2016, Te Puia Marae put their hand up and said, we will help, and I want to pay a special tribute to them. I think that was a courageous thing they did. They did it for the right reasons. They did it with the help of hundreds of other community organisations and individuals who donated goods and services to Te Puia Marae. And what we saw this week was a blight on the integrity of our Parliament. We saw private information about an individual from Te Puia Marae who are providing housing in the same way as is being provided under these two Riccarton Racecourse pieces of legislation that we're debating. We saw the chairman of that marae being undermined and slighted because he had put his hand up to address the housing situation.
Look, I've allowed quite a wide range on the overall housing stuff, but you're getting into specifics in Auckland, and I'll ask you to come back to this bill. Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Bridges, as I noted earlier in my contribution, during the committee stages, I did talk about whether or not somebody who followed Parliament closely would be able to advise us in the House about whether this was the first time that both a private local bill and a government bill had been heard together at committee stages. As I said, I was disappointed the Minister didn't answer me. No other member of the House was able to provide that information, but I'm now able to advise the House that the Marae Roa A and B block claim settlement bill, which was a government bill, and the Marae Roa A and B blocks incorporation bill, which was a private bill, were cognate throughout their passage through the House, but that neither of those bills had a committee stage. So we have set a new precedent. We have set a precedent, of course it's new, in this House, with the debating of these two bills, one a private local bill and one a government bill, being held at the same time during the committee stages. Of course it was sensible to do that because both bills are needed in order to change those two pieces of legislation that control the ability of the Riccarton Racecourse Board of Trustees to alter their legislative mandate and enable them to turn that 40 hectares into a housing development. Mr. Speaker, I want to make some concluding comments, not in any criticism of the legislation because we are supportive of it, but just to raise the concerns that were raised right at the original first reading, actually that were raised by my colleague Dr Megan Woods following her discussion with surrounding residents of this area. Not concern about the housing development in itself, but concern about the increased traffic pressure. We know how bad the traffic is around that part of Christchurch. It's not Auckland, it does move, but it's pretty congested. It's one of the peak traffic points. And there was no engagement with either the City Council or the Regional Council in terms of what additional transport opportunities might be opened up as a result of this significant increase in housing. So I would like to see the Minister now take an additional step and work with the City Council and the Regional Council to see how we can ensure that during the development of the site we don't end up with unpleasant road congestion as a result of these additional homes. The surrounding area, as the Minister pointed out, is magnificent. It's close to the university, it's close to schools, it's close to parks. There's lots of activity in this area. They have an excellent Member of Parliament. Dr Megan Woods is the Member of Parliament for Wigram. Riccarton is actually divided between two electorates, and the people who live in this side of Riccarton are very grateful that they're in Wigram electorate, the the Dr Megan Woods electorate rather than the others. And can I just say in conclusion that a lot of people who contributed to this deserve to be thanked, particularly the Board of Trustees and the City Council, and of course the Select Committee and their officials. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker.
I call